falling apart in a good way, a mini TEDx, and a whole conversation about marginalized groups coming at you right now.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we're gonna be diving back into trust and betrayal and
Trauma
today. Some fun, light-hearted topics for y'all.
Per usual, you're welcome.
Yeah. When I did Derek's podcast, he has this rattler he uses. Maybe I'll get one of those. I'll get a noisemaker.
I really would love that if you did that, Adi.
I can see it. I can see it in your face.
I love when you do things like that.
Jumping up and down. I want to bring you really quickly before we get into the conversation today, our review of the week, and it is by Earthy B. Love, love, love. Us too, Earthy B. Thank you. Beyond obsessed with this podcast, it has shed a light on so many issues that I'm going through and is so relatable. I look forward to each week's episode. Sophie and Adi's authenticity is so unique and calming. I'm so grateful for them and would give this 100 stars if I could.
Aww.
That's so nice.
Love that.
Thank you for that. So you guys know we've done an episode on the cheating and from both sides in our relationship, and I don't know if it was big for us to do the first one because you had written about it and had talked about it, Sophie, publicly.
Big. Anything that we do on the podcast is bigger than any other platform because writing an article is still very hidden and you can hide behind a screen. This is full on. There's no it's every detail. It's, you feel like you're sitting in the room with us when this is happening, and it's just full on. It's not a 5-minute to read article. It's an hour and 30-minute conversation. It's a lot. And we had 2 parts, and we talked about it in other episodes, like the one with Lacy Phillips. We revisited it. Actually, that was the first one that kind of introed it. If you think about it, the Lacy Phillips one was before going deep. And that one was where we kind of foreshadowed the whole thing and then dug in. So, there's been a lot of episodes where we do talk about it, but the deepest ones are the going deep episodes. And yeah, bless if you're someone who's never gone through a really intense trauma in your life.
Bless up.
Yeah. That's amazing. And hopefully you never do. And
oh yeah. I think just to be clear, because people get kind of mad about this sometimes, we're not recommending that you
go through hard times,
create trauma to get help. What we're saying is once you make it, if you go through trauma, there are tools we have found to make things better. And sometimes you get stronger on the other side of it.
Exactly. I actually want to read something. This is the trust card from the Moon deck, and we will put a code at the bottom. I think it's Sophie Love, but we'll see. We'll leave it at the bottom for the Moon deck so you can purchase one. This one is all about trust. And it says, I trust the change unfolding in my life. Sometimes we must let go of something good to let in something better. The wheel of life is always turning and change is necessary. Without it, we become complacent. Change is brewing. Loosen your grip and relax into it. As you're guided to step more authentically into your power and purpose, something has to shift. Change must occur. Trust the change unfolding in your life. Although the outcome may be unpredictable right now, when you settle in and open up to new possibilities, a wondrous world can emerge. There's no need to rush this process. You will grow wiser as you learn to surf the waves of change with more grace and ease. During this time, stick with your personal practices, make space to receive, and be kind to yourself. I absolutely love that. It's all about just change and trust and, even letting go of good things to let in something better. I just think it's so beautiful and, applicable to everything from home, life, relationships, health.
Yeah, it's so difficult for a lot of people to definitely to let go of good things in the hope of
mediocre
of better, because it's like you never really know
that bad
what's going to end up being. Yeah,
it's complacency is, whew.
Yeah,
And being stagnant, that's the worst. I mean, being stuck in something that's just like mediocre.
Isn't it weird though? You don't, because I've been in situations like that before, and when you're in it, you don't really know that you're stuck necessarily.
Yeah, until you realize that you are, and then it kills you. Like for me, it's like the minute I have awareness of something, it eats at me. Like,
yeah,
I can not know. And then the minute that I realize that I'm in a mediocre, not as great situation, that the minute the awareness comes to light, it's like nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
It eats at my soul.
Isn't it funny that, there's that phrase, ignorance is bliss, but like, not really. Because when you're stuck, you're miserable. You just don't understand that you're stuck, and that's why you're miserable. You think you're just having a shitty time. And then when you realize, I call it like see behind the curtain. When you see behind the curtain, it's like it's like the Oz story.
Wizard of Oz.
You all of a sudden go, oh, it's just a dude speaking on a speaker.
A loudspeaker.
Who cares? It's not that big a deal. Before it was so scary and overwhelming. And I think it goes all ways. I have a client and couple, the guy in a couple who had sort of adopted a very particular role in their relationship. And 2 years ago, when we started working together, literally said in a session that this is who he is. He has to do this in life. That's what his purpose is. And we're now 2 years later in the relationship. A lot of things have changed about the relationship, but I was reminding him of this yesterday. And I was reminding him that 2 years ago, he saw his role as being something very particular, and that was raising his child. That was like, he had been a stay-at-home dad. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm here to raise my kid. And he was having a similar discussion with me yesterday. And that similar discussion was about a very different role. And so I was just paying attention and allowing him to see. Remember 2 years ago, we were having a discussion about how this is who I am. I'm supposed to do this. This is what I'm supposed to be functioning as in the world, as a stay-at-home dad. And now, 2 years later, you're having the exact same conversation about your current role, about what it is that you see yourself functioning as. And sometimes it's nice to have a mirror held to you as long as you can be open, right? Because you were saying once you see behind the curtain, it's hard to unsee, of course. But I think the trick is that once you see behind one curtain, is to understand that you can't be sure that the next belief you have, the next situation you're in, isn't actually another illusion.
Right.
When you can see behind another curtain. Because if it was true at one point, why couldn't it be true right now?
Right.
And that's the beauty about maybe just literally saying it is embracing change.
Yep.
Not ever being afraid of change, but embracing change. It's going to come. So do I get to fight it and do everything I can to try to keep my world the same? Or do I recognize that change is coming? And it's almost my job to foresee it, understand it, embrace it, and move along with it. It's like a dance instead of trying to stand there and fight against the coming change.
Exactly. And we talk about so many amazing topics with Shannon. He talks about a really hard breakup with one of his partners when he, I think, was living in New York. He felt like his life was falling apart. One of his really great quotes was, "I feel like my life is falling apart, but in a great way."
Yeah.
He's just so sweet and wonderful and such a light. Even when we're talking about such challenging topics, just such a light. And I just really enjoyed our conversation. I hope it inspires all of you. I mean, even like all the stuff about power, I really loved and it really resonated.
Well, he came in because he helps people with meditation and really find their center. And you can really tell that in his personality.
Yeah, find their power.
Yeah. And
what ignites them.
You can really tell that,
yeah.
Right? You can kind of just see in him that he's this calming presence. And so that was nice by itself. And it's always one of my favorite parts about doing a podcast like this is we get to meet really cool people that, we were just 1 degree of separation away from. But it was really nice to see somebody walk us through some of the pain, again, that he has experienced in his life that has helped him reconnect to the kind of guidance and spark that he helps other people experience in their own life.
Exactly. Yep. He's awesome. I can't wait to have you guys listen. I'm so excited to announce that Rachell and I, one of my dearest friends from one of the first podcasts, we're doing a Nourish Your Soul retreat in Sayulita, Mexico. Adi will be coming. The kids will be showing in and out. They're not going to be at the retreat, but they're going to stay at a different home close by. And it's going to be amazing. Again, called Nourish Your Soul. You can go to my website, thephilosophy.com, and look at our events section, or we'll leave a link for direct signups in the show notes. It's going to be an incredible, the thing is, it's not just a yoga retreat. It's about really nourishing your soul. It's bringing you back to the truth of who you really are. Beautiful practices. Yes, we'll be using moon cards and tarot cards and doing lots of spiritual digging, lots of movement from dance to yoga to HIIT workouts. We're going to be right on the beach in Mexico in Sayulita, in this beautiful surf town. I'm so excited. So definitely check out in the show notes, go to the link. And
you two go deep when you have retreats. And most of the retreats are just in LA, right?
We have been trying to bring it more local, to do drop-ins for people, mostly because I'm a mom and it's hard for me to go international for a week without my kids. This time we'll bring them, lucky us, but it's also not always the easiest for people to leave their own world, work, etc. So we're trying to do more 1 or 2 day pop-ups. This one will be in Sayulita. Nourish Yo So.
Do it, yo. We'll have a link down in the bottom for y'all, and that should be fun.
Enjoy, Shannon.
Yeah, you had something else you want to talk about, though.
Oh, I have a spring playlist if you'd like to go listen to it. It's under Philosophie Mama on Spotify. It's called Spring Is Here.
You guys should, how often do you update that playlist?
I'd say like every 1 to 2 months. The last one was February Feels, which is also an incredible playlist. So definitely get in there, listen. If you're not subscribed to my newsletters, we send one out every single Friday announcing all philosophy goodness, all of the updates, new recipes, new videos that we post on our YouTube. It's just a really fun, vibrant, inspiring food space and more. It's lifestyle as well. And then on Monday, like every other to once a month Mondays, I throw in a magical Monday email that people just love. So just know that if you're subscribed, you get those as well. And I have some spiritual downloads and some moon magic and all sorts of stuff. So definitely head over to thephilosophy.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Go to Spotify for Philosophie Mama playlists and check out Nourish Your Soul.
Awesome. Enjoy this interview, everybody. You will love, love, love Shannon. See you next week.
Bye. This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophie Superfoods. The Philosophie offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophie fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophie superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, everybody, welcome to our conversation section today. We've got a friend who shares a lot of common acquaintances. I feel like we know a lot of people in the same circle. And Shannon Algeo, you have your own podcast. You do coaching, so you're in a similar space to what we do already. And then it was really funny to find out that on your podcast, Soulfeed, you literally just launched your new episode, right? And you launched it with one of our really close friends, Shaman Durek. And it's actually just a coincidence that later today we're going to be talking to Durek ourselves.
Nothing's a coincidence.
Really excited to have you on, and I would love to have you introduce yourself to our Ignited listeners.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm so excited to be talking to both of you. I always love the opportunity to connect like this and share our conversation. There's something special that happens when, I have a podcast, Soulfeed. So I know when we set the intention to come together and have a conversation and share ideas that will hopefully vibrate and resonate with people, that's always an honor and a privilege. So thank you for having me. The work that I do is, I speak and I teach meditation and do life coaching with clients. And the work that I do is I help people remember where their power is. So we tend to, in our lives, there's so many areas of our lives where we give our power away. And a lot of times we don't even realize that we're giving our power away until it's gone. And then we start to feel the impact of the power gone. And that can look like giving our power away to someone who we want to like us, or to a job that we want to pay us, or to any circumstance where we literally take our power center and we consciously or unconsciously give it to someone or something else. And then that causes a depletion of energy in our own psyche, bodies, and our whole energy system. And then can lead to so many can lead to a lot of suffering, whether that's like physical suffering or dis-ease, or feeling like I'm not on my purpose, or there's like something that's not quite aligned or right. So I'm a firm, incredible believer in like we all need support. We live in a culture and society that is founded on this idea of like rugged individualism. And I think the result of that is something that has caused so many people to feel the pressure of like, oh, I have to do it on my own. I have to create it on my own. I have to stand on my own 2 feet. And so I work with people and work with myself to do this reintegration process of leaning into community, getting the support that we need, because we all need support to see ourselves the way that we truly are, and not the way that we've been told to see ourselves by the world around us. So it's really like whether I'm doing career work with a client, or my podcast, or I'm teaching meditation, or I'm giving a talk on a stage, it's an exploration of looking at where has the power gone away and how can we take our power back.
I love that.
I love it. You said something that I think gets missed oftentimes in these conversations, and it is, I teach the work and I do the work myself. I think a lot of people, when they listen to people like yourself, and to us too, around relationship or whatever, recovery or wellness for Sophie, they imagine somehow that we have finished the work and it's done and we've gotten to the other side. And I think what all of us know is it actually never ends. You just keep doing the work, and that's how you show up at your best on a daily basis. So if you wouldn't mind, because now you're here, but I'd love if you can go back a little bit and tell us, how did you discover, where were you giving up your power? What transformation did you go through that allowed you to realize that these things were happening for you, and then develop the tools to get to this place?
Yeah, so it is a process of waves of learning and integrating and teaching, learning, integrating, and teaching. And so I really don't I don't interact with the idea that I've like arrived somewhere and I'm on the other side, like you're saying. Totally. It's like it's such a process, and so at every stage, I think it's important for leaders to be revealing their humanity, like the two of you do on your show. It's a weird form of delusional perfectionism when people present themselves as some kind of enlightened spiritual master. And I don't think people do it intentionally. I think oftentimes society and people who follow us, they want you to be perfect. They want you to be strong. And I find a lot of vulnerability, for sure. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but a lot of like real grounded strength in the fact that like the reason that I'm teaching and anything that I really have to share is something that I've gone through myself. Like or I'm going through, I try to always teach from the groundedness of my experience, or maybe from the experience of someone who has taught me something and I'm able to share the groundedness of their experience. But I think that that's where real communication, like true communication, comes from. Like, we're in this together. You're a human being with me. And if you found a way to empower yourself on this path, then, oh, maybe I can do that too. Or I think I actually can do that too. So, so there's been many points along the road. A big one for me in the somewhat recent past is something that you both have talked about on your podcast. I lived in New York for the first 8 years of my 20s. Basically all of my 20s, I lived in New York City. And then I moved with an ex who was my boyfriend at the time to LA. And we were together for almost 3 years. And in that relationship and in the midst of that move, it became clear that infidelity was a part of the relationship. And I was cheated on. And that was really hard for me to process, not only because I felt betrayed by him, but also because I betrayed myself, because I knew he was lying to me, and I didn't have the confidence, and I didn't have the knowledge and the experience that my gut is as incredibly accurate as it is. I didn't know it was accurate. I thought I was crazy.
Sophie's nodding her head pretty strongly here for listeners who can't watch. I'd love to hear your take on this, Soph.
No, I just think it's interesting that you gave away your power. Like it's your work, like your life's work. And that's, I think oftentimes as healers, we come into this world to heal our own traumas and our own wounds. And that is then our greatest gift in how we help people. And, with Adi, it's with addiction stuff. He came into this world and for whatever reason, had to go through this really hard situation with drugs really. And sex and just different forms of addiction that took his power away. And he had to go through that so that now he can help clients find their truth and find the thing inside of them that's making them, go to a substance or to an escape. And now he's like the most inspiring person when it comes to helping people find what it is that they're experiencing shame surrounding so that he can get into the deeper work of the addiction. And it's interesting that your life's purpose is to help people find their power, see where they've given away their power. And you have the similar experience. And it's like, we have to go through it ourselves. We need that life experience. You can't just read about it. And Adi got his PhD in psychology and went back to school for addiction and from one of the top accredited schools in the world for psychology. But that was after he had the life experience. Right. He already went through this drug addiction, jail, all these crazy things. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to go back to school and also make sure I know all this other stuff, be more experienced in that way. And I think it's interesting that one of your biggest, deepest traumas has to do with something that you help your clients do every single day.
Totally. Yeah. And that's where we build the real spiritual musculature, is in our real actual lives.
Exactly.
And I think the knowledge, the intellectual knowledge, like you referenced, I can read about it, can guide us in the right direction of where we want to go. It can help focus the mind. It can help give us a context for oh my God, this is actually possible. I could heal this, or I could be more empowered than I am right now. Mm-hmm. And then, when we consciously or unconsciously set that intention to become that empowered version of ourselves, then life or the universe or our unconscious minds, all of it are going to give us the experiences we need to actually become that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of, the dynamics that occurred in that relationship with my ex were also things that I was healing from my parents' relationship.
Totally.
Yeah. I was going to say that if Sophie was talking, I was thinking, the drugs weren't when I took my power away. They were almost the way for me to take back some of the power I'd given up a decade or two earlier, because so many of us, I think I would imagine there were similar experiences for you even before this relationship, where we are taught that we are supposed to be a certain way and that there's only a given route, there's a path. And for me, it was very clear. It was, you go to school until you get until you become a physician, maybe an attorney, but probably a physician.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to be happy for the rest of your life because you're going to find somebody, you're going to marry them, you're going to be a doctor, and life will be good. And it just didn't feel right. It just didn't. There were a lot of reasons. There were a lot of family issues that came up around that, but it didn't resonate. And I kept trying to fit myself into that story. And I was not that character, at least not in that time in my life. And I gave away my power by believing that I need to fit into that story rather than what I do with all my clients now, which is tell your own story. Become comfortable in your own version of self. And so I think maybe you were about to speak on this and I want to hear more about it. There were things leading up to that relationship that told you a story of how you were supposed to be and who you were supposed to be with. And it was almost in the leaving is when you regain the power. When you decided to leave that relationship, that's when you decided, you know what, I'm not going to tell that story to myself anymore. I'm going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like to first speak to what you're saying, it reminds me of Brene Brown's book and the Theodore Roosevelt quote, Daring Greatly, that when we are told, like, these are what societal norms are, this is what you should do, this is who you should be. And then it requires an incredible amount of daring greatly and vulnerability to say, no, I'm actually going to create my own system. I'm going to actually follow the guidance of my soul, even if it makes no sense in the logic of this world.
To everybody else.
What'd you say?
To everybody else.
To everybody else. Yeah. And so then what does it take to not care about the perception, because we care so much about what people think of us. We define ourselves based on who other people define us as, that it requires such a strength of character and groundedness in self to say, I know what you're going to think, or I have ideas about what you're going to think, and I'm going to choose my soul mission anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a powerful concept for people to tune into, because we see others. I think this is something that happens. I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me, and it happened to me probably more when I was younger. But we see people out there who have achieved, and we see their end result, and we think to ourselves, I wish I could be like that. I wish I could do great things, such as, pick the person you want. But almost inevitably, when we look at the biggest examples, not only do we find repeated opportunities for them to fail and actual failure over and over and over, but also we find that they typically ended up going after a path that everybody thought was ridiculous, absurd, and the probability of success was near zero. And we can start, anything. I was just thinking of Tom Ford. When he started creating a car, one of his quotes is, if I would have asked the people what they wanted, they would have told me they wanted a faster horse. And instead, this guy goes and invents a car. Nobody knew a car existed. People thought he was insane at the notion that, because he thought that people would get into these metal boxes and push pedals to get where they wanted. They already had horses. Why would anybody want a car? That sounds crazy to us right now, but that's because he was able to create a different world for us. I always joke about J.K. Rowling because, now one of the most famous, most established authors in the universe ever. She wrote a fantasy book about wizards living in a dark land. Like, whoever would have imagined it would be anything but a kid's book if it ever got accepted? And now every adult, my kid reads them, but every adult I know has read them. Yeah. It's like she got rejected repeatedly, right? So the idea of, wait, it's almost my job. If I want to have success, and I don't mean monetary success, I mean life success. If I want to have that kind of success, the people I admire rarely, if ever, just followed the path everybody else set out for them. They all moved forward in ways that were unimaginable to anyone until they did it.
Yeah, the we don't see the hard work, we don't see the struggle. That's not always celebrated as much as the accolades, the awards, the Broadway show, the book that turns into the movie, that turns into the Broadway show, that turns into the $1 billion business or whatever.
The overnight success.
She wrote that story for her. I believe she wrote that story for her child on a napkin when she was broke.
Yeah, living in her car.
Wow. Yeah. I want to go back because I didn't fully answer your previous question, which was, and it was about about something about how my relationship and giving my power away. Don't want to leave that undone.
Absolutely. I imagine that when you got into that relationship, you had already given up a lot of power before, because that's what allowed you to be in a relationship where somebody treated you that way. And the story was that this is the relationship you get. And I'm wondering what led to that.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of factors that led to that. I think there's something that I said to my ex early on that I see was a setup for the whole dynamic that played out, which was, if you ever cheat on me, this is over. And you both were just talking about this dynamic in the episode of your show that I was listening to, where you both were vulnerably sharing about your relationship. And it made me think of this, is I said, if you cheat on me, it's done. We're done. It's over. And so that set up a dynamic that if he was going to, and I'm by no means making it right, the choice that he made, but he knew on some level, if he told me that he cheated on me, then he was going to lose me.
Yeah.
So I set up a dynamic where I said that honesty is important to me and truth is the most important thing in this relationship. And truth is what I really want to know. That's what I said. But what I actually also set up is, but I don't want to know this truth.
So important. So important for people to tune into that, right? Oh, thank you. I mean, thank you for sharing that and having the memory, right? Actually being able to connect to the fact that you had set up the scenario. Because I think people don't lie because they're liars. I really don't. I think people lie because the circumstances around them dictate that they believe the best choice is to lie in that moment.
Yep. It's fear. It's fear. And so, I'm writing something right now. I'm writing a book.
Oh, wait, what?
I'm writing a book, and the book is about truth. The book is about the exploration of truth, because I think it's so interesting how we think we want to know the truth. There's like quotes like, the truth will set you free. This truth will set you free. We love truth speakers. We want to know the truth. Throughout that whole relationship, into that whole time that I was being cheated on, I wanted to know the truth, but I didn't really want to know the truth.
Right.
I wanted to know, I wanted him to tell me the truth. I didn't want to listen to the truth in me. Because the truth in me knew exactly what was happening every time it was going down. My gut instinct was divine guidance. And I have like ultimate forgiveness for myself because I didn't know that yet. And this is back to what we were talking about. Like this is the experience that we have to go through to actually be the people that we say we want to be. So yeah, that was definitely a part of it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it always comes back to fear, right? Like the things that kind of get in our way and make us stub our toe, or like the rock in front of us, like it's just fear. It's fear of knowing ourselves. It's fear of being truly intimate with another. It's fear of what will people think. It's like, that's always the thing that gets us stopped up.
I was recently with Glennon Doyle at the Wanderlust Wellspring. She was speaking, and I talked to her afterwards, and I said to her, I was like, sometimes I just feel like my life is falling apart. Like I feel like my life is falling apart, but in a great way. Like I feel like I'm shedding layers of things that are no longer serving me.
Saying.
And she goes, let it burn, let it burn. And she started spinning in a circle, and she was like, let it burn, let it burn, let it burn. And then she signed the book that I had just bought, and it just in big writing, she's like, let it burn. And I think I know how we're so afraid to make that change, make that shift, have that conversation, speak our truth, because on some level we know it's going to cause things to come crumbling down.
Oh yeah. I've been sick for like a week and a half now, and I'm in such, like you too, but I'm in such an evolved place in my life, and like all the people I hang out with also. So no one's like, oh, you have the flu. They're like, you must be doing some deep healing. You are about to transform, honey. Like every single person in my life is like, I can't wait to see who you are on that other side. I'm like, okay.
You're like, right now I just kind of feel sick.
Got the flu. No, but I mean, really,
Right.
I did back like this was actually my busiest time the last month or so, maybe 5 weeks. I've had an event every single weekend where I'm giving these epic experiences and wasn't giving myself time to recover afterwards. And it was 5 weeks in a row of really, traveling, holding space for 200 people, taking them through like a shamanic yoga experience, like all of these crazy one weekend after another while parenting 3 kids, including a baby, while having 17 businesses, like all this stuff going on. I didn't give myself any space to actually absorb all the magic that I've been giving in the world. So my body shut down, and it's a forced time for me to just absorb and crumble and, allow it to let it burn and like go. And then now I'm, emerging on the other side. But it's so funny to think about, like a lot like how Adi and I talk about how we actually not enjoy, but we're grateful for when we have fights, because then on the other side is the learning, is the growth, is the closeness, is the intimacy. Very much so, just like this experience where it's like, yes, I know I'm sick, but on the other side is going to be like this beautiful other experience of growth and transformation.
Yes.
You get trained to look at the world that way.
Yeah. It's like eating healthy. Like I actually enjoy eating healthy, and you used to always challenge me on that. And like, but you're not actually enjoying it. I'm like, no, I really do like the way healthy things taste now. They're just like, I've trained my brain. Like that's,
well, it's like fuel. You would explain it like I'm fueling my body. So it's like if I go to the gas station and I get the better gas for my car, the idea is I'm keeping my car cleaner on the inside. You look at food in that way.
Exactly.
And to take that to the next level and talk about conflict and struggle and be able to see the other side of it. I was sitting with a client just today and saying, look, we always get a choice. We get a choice of whether we want to look. Everything has a bad and a good side. It's literally like the piece you decide to look at. Yeah, Sophie put air quotes around that thing. And I mean, that's the way I mean it. It's like, I had a client who's visiting here from the UK and was sitting here kind of bemoaning the fact that she has to leave because she's been here for 12 days. We've done a lot of really good work. She feels really good here. And she has to go back. She was upset that she has to go back. And the next morning, she sends me a screenshot of her airline sending her an email that her flight got canceled. And it has to get rescheduled. So she gets rescheduled for about 48 hours later. And she sends me a thing saying, you see, no matter what I do, everything gets destroyed. I go, hold on. Isn't this exactly what you asked for in my office yesterday? Like, weren't you sitting here saying, I wish I didn't have to leave Friday? And then the airline sends you a message saying you don't leave Friday. You're going to leave Saturday night. And now that's a bad thing?
Like no matter what, finding the thing to feel like victim-y about.
Yeah, I go, you can't.
Have it both ways.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And look, you asked for this. And she says, yeah, but it was a coincidence. I go, how did you just turn it? If it's a bad thing, you made it happen. And if it's a good thing, it's a coincidence. Let's flip that coin over and let's just start saying. And so, I mean, obviously being with Sophie now for 14 years has helped me do that because Sophie's orientation is to do this in the world. And I came from the dark, let's look at the things that aren't working out and go fix them kind of piece versus let's celebrate all the things that are working exactly the way we'd like them to. But there's huge power in our intent, in our beliefs, in our motivations. And at some point, it's a choice because you make a choice or you're trained by other people around you to do that. And then it's a habit. Then it becomes a thing you're just used to doing. And look at a breakup as, wow, okay. I mean, I guess I'm gonna learn something pretty big from this experience instead of, oh my God, I'm always going to be alone. It changes your experience. It changes the way you treat other people around you while you're going through that difficult time in your life. And it also allows you to open your mind to the lessons that are inevitably going to come from that. And if you stay closed off to it and you just cry about the fact that, and it's okay to cry, that's not what I'm saying, but if you only focus on the negative component of it, then you stay closed off to all the positive learning you can do.
1,000, yes, TED Talk, 1,000%. I have so much I want to say about that. The not everything is happening to you, it's happening for you. When you choose to operate in that dynamic, not everything is happening to me, it's happening for me. And yet sometimes it can feel like this is happening to me. This is happening to me. And now this is happening to me. And that's the victim archetype, which Carl Jung, Archetypal Patterns, Carolyn Mace also teaches about this. The role of the victim archetype, because each archetypal pattern has shadow and light. And so the victim is that shadow of feeling like a victim, feeling like this is happening to me, is what leads the way to the opportunity to become the victor, from victim to victor, and to know the light. So when you're going through it and you feel like something is happening to you, then that's not a bad thing. And it's not to say that you shouldn't feel that way. However, it's like any emotion, our emotions have, they're our emotional power center. It's like our emotions are incredibly power purifying energies. Emotion is energy in motion. And so when we look at emotion and how it can actually fuel us to become the people that we are here to become, it's a question of, what is this teaching me? And then like, how am I perceiving the situation? Because if I catch myself, like you mentioned about your client, if I catch myself constantly perceiving things as negative, then there's some energy in me that doesn't want it to go well.
Yeah.
So why am I attached to it not going well?
Yes.
And that's sort of an attachment to suffering. So what is it like? How do I want to feel? And am I going to allow myself to live a life where I feel like success and momentum and movement and winning and joy and ecstasy? I was just interviewing Shaman Durek, and he said, like, everything can feel orgasmic. You can have mental orgasms, you can have emotional orgasms, you can have physical orgasms. Like, you can have all these orgasms all day long. And I really love that, because it's like being delighted by life.
I love that you said, will we allow ourselves? Because most people feel, I believe, most people see it as, will we get the opportunity to? Will we be lucky enough to? Will I get the right job or find the right partner to be able to enjoy my life? Whereas what we're talking about is, will I give myself the choice? Will I permit myself to be happy as life happens, right? Versus waiting for the right thing to happen in life to make me happy. I've worked with, and I'm sure you've done the same thing, I've worked with people who, if you ask anybody out here, seem like they have everything. Money, the cars, the houses, the celebrity, whatever you want. And they feel empty inside. None of these things on the outside will ever deliver it for you. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't have them, because you can do a lot of great things with money, and driving great cars is fun and it's enjoyable. It's just that by itself will not deliver the way you want to feel in the world. If you have those things and have found the inner peace and the purpose and the contribution you want to create in the world, you will have a positive experience on yachts, in Rolls Royces, and on private jets. But if you haven't found that, you can be as miserable as anybody else in the middle of the most opulent luxury imaginable. And I really want people to connect to it, because I feel like people keep believing that there's something on the horizon that will give them the happiness. And it's literally where you're standing right now is where you can deliver it.
Yeah, I learned that lesson I really saw that when I worked several years ago. When I was living in New York City, I worked at Lululemon, and I worked on the Lincoln Center location, and people would come from all over the world to this store. This store is like the second U.S. store, second Lululemon in the country, and there were some amazingly incredible people that I worked with, and people who came into the store, and there were also extremely wealthy people who were nasty and miserable. And I was like, and I remember at the time I didn't have a lot of money, and I was like, I wanted money. I was in that dynamic. I was like, oh, if I just had more money, then I would be happy. And what the universe was giving me was like person after person who had so much money and would come in and spend thousands of dollars in the store and would be mean to the people who worked at the store, or you could just feel their misery and their suffering. And it was such an important thing for me to witness, because it was this like in my face lesson of, Shannon, just because someone has money, that is not going to guarantee fulfillment, purpose, happiness, connection, joy, anything. And I'll just add this. I was just in the Middle East, in the West Bank, in Israel. And I was with a peace activist there named Antoine Saka, who's doing incredible work in Israel and in Palestine. And he said to me, we were staying in Bethlehem, and he said to me, you know, Shannon, if you walked through all of Bethlehem right now, you wouldn't find a single homeless person on the street. And I was like, what? I was like, how can that be? Like, you know, Bethlehem is not a particularly like fancy place. It's in the West Bank. It's in an occupied territory. It's very complicated there. And I said, how could that be? And he said, no one in this whole place would let anyone, no one in Bethlehem would let anyone go without a meal and a bed.
Mm.
And so it kind of reframed for me, just, you know, we think of America as this like wealthy country where we have all of these resources and all of these things available to us. And
but yet everyone holds on to them so tightly.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way that we take care of each other, like that is wealth of a society and of a culture.
So important. Yeah. I'm from Israel, so that topic is always complicated.
Are you really?
Yeah. And it's always been a complicated topic. I almost feel like at one point, Soph, maybe after we do our vaccine show, I want to do an Israel show.
Yeah.
It's always hard to get two people from different sides of that story to really sit down and have a full conversation, I feel like, because I think maybe this colors my version of the world to some extent. But having lived in Israel for 14 years of my life, and we go back every year, at our core, I see essentially all people as the same. And what ends up creating a difference are these stories, these boundaries, sometimes these physical barriers we put in place between ourselves. And this leaning that we have, and it's a well-known psychological fact that has been here forever, which is the us versus them story, right? The us versus them story is that there's something that unites us and that they are different, and we have to protect ourselves from them, because in being different, they want to threaten who we are. Now, I don't think Israel is the only one who does it. I think there are endless countries, right? Iran does it. I mean, there's, you know, the Emirates, like even in that singular story, there are so many players who have that viewpoint of this singular story. And it's so difficult to pull yourself out of it. But when you are in the West Bank, like the story you just told, and when you're in Israel, it feels totally different. Because among those people, among them and among us, if we want to look at it that way, they care about others. They want to be happy. They want freedoms. They want the ability to prosper. All the same things that we all want are present. And maybe even the bigger, even over, because Sophie and I want to help heal relationships and make couples either not get together in relationships they shouldn't, or not get divorced once they do. I want to help people heal from addiction. But maybe even the umbrella above that, around this radical transparency, is that piece of honesty that you mentioned at the beginning when we were talking. And that is, if we all started actually sharing what is going on inside more openly, the doubts, the darkness, the light and the shadow, and started listening openly to other people's truth because they were sharing the same with us. Maybe this is a pipe dream, and maybe I'm imagining that this can happen and it won't, but I'm going to stay strong in my belief. We will end up discovering that almost all of the conflicts that the world is engaged in are created by this fear that you mentioned. This fear that somebody is going to hurt me, somebody is going to take advantage of me, somebody is not going to accept me, reject me, and therefore I'm going to attack, right? I'm going to create this aggressive posture, the story in my head that I have to get them first before they get me.
Well, and it comes back to what we talked about in the beginning, which is these wounds from childhood or from past relationships or past experiences that are not healed. So we're doing this constant dance, like you trigger my wound, I trigger your wound, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, so that societies and tribes and communities are like whining about their triggers and their wounds, and they're just going back and forth, and then it becomes exacerbated, and it's creating huge trauma in the world.
Yeah.
And it's all these like people that don't have wounds that they're dealing with. They're not just talking to the other and being like, that really triggered me, that really made me feel something. Or, in history, like it starts at the micro. It starts at us dealing with our own shit. It starts with us just healing, standing up, not being afraid to talk about what's going on within us.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating conversation to explore, because it's what I experienced is everything that you're saying. Yes, is what I'm basically trying to say. And I think that us versus them paradigm is that idea of separation, that the idea of you are an other and the other is an enemy, and I need to protect myself from you, sets up this hardening and this divide that perpetuates more division and less communing. And it's in the coming together where healing is possible. So the part of the work that my friend Antoine is doing, and he's like a brilliant person to talk about this, because he just will talk rings around everything, and you can't get any sense of what side he's on, because that's not the game he's in.
Yeah.
And what he does is part of the work that he does is he brings Germans and Israeli Jews and Arab Palestinians together in spaces to talk about the impact of the trauma that's not just happened recently, but over the course of the last 100+ years. Yeah. And it's so interesting to look at the way that trauma gets perpetuated. And when someone is wounded, and rightfully so, that wound needs to be healed. But what can happen is that person or that society can act out of that wound. And the more that we continue to other people and separate ourselves from them, that's what this new season of my podcast is about, is shattering the echo chamber. Because I think it's so dangerous if we are in our echo chamber of everyone looks like me and sounds like me and is affirming back the same mantras that I'm putting out, and doesn't like Donald Trump and doesn't like whatever that is, or loves Donald Trump, like whatever, then what I'm doing is I'm creating a scar tissue, a hardening around myself. And then when I actually, Van Jones talks about this in his book, Beyond the Messy Truth, when I actually step into conversation with someone who disagrees with me, I'm so triggered and so afraid and so disgusted that I objectify that person into an enemy, and immediately unwilling to hear them.
Yes.
And that is that can be so violent when we communicate like that, and when we make someone else wrong, that actually, and I've had this experience with people in my family who I disagree with about like abortion rights and things like this. When we stay in relationship with people who we think are enemies or others, when we stay in relationship with them, then we actually can continue to have an influence on each other.
Yes.
And even if that influence is minuscule, like we're able to just sit through a dinner together or we're able to smile at each other on the street, that is enough to lead to the next stage of healing. But if we shut each other out, we're fucked.
So let me ask you a question, because obviously Trump is a big one, and we've talked about it a little bit with Ryan on the show, but you talked about having a boyfriend. You're queer, right?
Yes, I don't identify with the word queer, but I'm gay.
Yeah, you're gay. Whichever. So gay is the word. Yet I imagine, because when I was in high school, a lot of my friends who had to come out, that was a difficult process. And for some of the people that I saw in high school, was one of the first times that they all of a sudden became them to other people in their family who had up to that point thought they were part of us, and had family members who couldn't accept them as being gay. And it created ripple effects for years sometimes, like people getting kicked out of the house, not invited to weddings. And I mean, just really big influence. And I wonder, we talked about it a little bit because you got right into a relationship that you had. But was that, in your life, was that a difficult experience coming out?
It was a more difficult experience being me than it was coming out, because when I was in Catholic school, from the time I was like 5 or 6 years old, I was being called a faggot. I was being told Shannon's a girl's name. I was being pushed around in the bathroom when I was trying to pee at a urinal. I was like, so I didn't even know what gay was, but to me, I was taught that it's something bad and it's something I should be afraid of, because being called it makes me not safe.
Yeah.
And so when I came out to my parents, they took me out to dinner. My parents are amazing.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Yeah. They were like, let's go celebrate. By the next morning, my mom gave me a stuffed animal and a card. Like, my parents were incredible around me coming out.
Oof, that's so powerful.
However, my community and the way that I interacted in the world, my desire to hang out with girls at lunch instead of boys, my love of singing and theater more so than football. My seventh grade teacher told my parents in a parent-teacher meeting, because I was struggling with some of the kids in my class, my seventh grade teacher said, well, if Shannon could just be like the other boys and play football, I think he'd be fine. Yeah. So I grew up in a culture of a Catholic school that was, in some ways, I had lovely experiences there. That's where I began to pray / meditate. And in other ways, it was deeply harmful and oppressive to who I was. And to circle it back to what we were talking before, gave me a strength of character from a really young age. It's like, when the world is calling you something, then you have to decide who you are. Yeah. When the world is trying to tell you who you are. Yeah.
And pay attention, right? Because part of what I'm hearing is the pain. And the reason I was asking the question even is we're talking about an us versus them. And look, I'll just be honest about it. Like, I'm a white guy, and I'm from Israel, but nobody knows that here. Like, nobody sees that. My English is pretty damn good at this point. It wasn't when I moved, but now it's pretty good. So everybody just assumes I was born in the US and I'm just a white upper middle class guy. And it's a fact that this group has a hard time understanding being the them, because even I was talking to somebody else about this just the other day, this whole fantasy of going back to the 1950s. So like, that's when America was greatest. That's not when America was greatest. That's when America was greatest for white dudes. Oh. I mean, there's not a lot of other groups in the US who were thinking America was amazing at the time.
Well, we have to look at this idea of like, when was America great? When was America? And America has great qualities and great aspirations, and it's not a bad place at all.
We have yet to get anywhere.
Yeah, it's like this country was founded on the free work of slaves, and that is a wound and a trauma that it has not been addressed and healed. The way that Germany has provided reparations to Jewish organizations around the world, America has not provided reparations for
Native Americans, slavery. Like, there are deep
Native Americans
of not literally just enforcing us on them over and over and over, and then just whitewashing it and pretending like, well, that wasn't that bad. It's all, it's all good. And I mean, you were asking when was it so great? I would imagine that just like a person, I mean, the US is still a pretty young country in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
If you look at history, we're like rowdy teenagers right now.
Yeah.
And if we don't grow the fuck up, we're going to go the way of every other amazing empire that has ever existed. And that will be the way of gluttony and boredom and apathy,
self-implosion.
Yeah, well, like I always joke, it's like the Roman Empire is now known as Italy, and the British Empire is England and the UK. The Ottoman Empire, the biggest empire of its time, Turkey. Like, we need to get out of this delusional place that us, whatever we define as us, is the best, and start understanding that. Honestly, the way I see it is there's almost no them. We just created them. And if we can just move into that place of acceptance and having the really, like you said, and I love that you said it, have the really difficult conversation. Start embracing the really difficult conversations instead of running away from them.
Absolutely. Because if you say something to me, if I'm triggered by you, you are me. You are a mirror.
Yeah.
To who I am. And if I wasn't triggered by you, then there wouldn't be any issue. The point is that I am triggered by you. And so you are here to teach something to me about my healing.
Yeah.
Because if I think you're separate, then there's some part of myself that I'm suppressing or repressing or denying or shaming.
Totally.
So when someone brings up shame in us, then that shame is already there. It's like Dr. Wayne Dyer said, like when you squeeze the juice that comes out of something is what's inside. So you squeeze an orange juice comes out. You squeeze an asshole comes out. Not to make anyone just a complete asshole, because that no one is that. And I think that I'm really very fascinated by this dynamic between personal power and systemic power, because I kind of float between these two worlds of the personal empowerment community and the social justice community. And a lot of people in the social justice community have problems with things like spiritual bypass and saying, just think about it positively. Because when you tell someone who's been oppressed as a victim systemically for generations, it's like, how can someone in privilege just stand there and say like, well, it's your responsibility to change your thoughts? And then
I love Glennon. You talked about Glennon Doyle earlier. I love her work and her response to that criticism. I got to say that was really special to see, of her going, oh, you know what? I'm doing the thing that I'm not supposed to do right now, which is telling people that I can't really understand the experience they've struggled with for generations, how to do it. And she stepped back and allowed a bigger voice than she could provide into the conversation, which was huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I very much appreciate Glennon and the model that she's providing for how to show up as a powerful white ally in the space, when to step forward and speak, and when to hold back and let others speak and listen. Next week, I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but from when we're recording this now, next week, an interview is coming out with Layla Saad, who her workbook, her free workbook, the #MeAndWhite Supremacy workbook, is for white folks to do the deeper spiritual inner work of how white supremacy exists in each of us. That workbook is approaching 100,000 individual downloads.
Wow.
And she's doing incredible work as well. And then also, this kind of dynamic between the social justice and the personal empowerment is also, if we are only dealing with systemic power and not looking at the personal power and agency that each of us has, then there's also a missing link. If we're only saying the power is in changing the systemic, the power is in changing the systemic, yes, that must happen. And those who have been oppressed do not need to wait for that systemic power to change to access power within themselves, because that is our personal power and the right that every human being has, no matter what their outer circumstances are.
Absolutely. And parallel movement, right? We've got to do it all together. You can't wait for one thing to change. And I have to respect, as I even say this, the incredible amount of resolve, motivation, and tenacity that has to exist in people from marginalized groups who decide to take that work on. Because it's easy for me to sit here and say it. It only comes up in my life when I start talking about the Palestinian conflict or Judaism and the Holocaust. But I can actually completely erase it and pretend like I don't need to talk about it. And there are groups of people who can't. And so they wake up in the morning in a reality that I have a hard time understanding. And I just want to respect that, the amount of effort that takes to wake up every morning and decide over and over and over, I'm going to go do that work.
Yeah, and that's the concept of white fragility, which I've struggled with, and phases of my awakening around this is like when I sit down with a person of color and they start to unpack the impact of systemic oppression, and it's like kind of affecting my vibe, or it might be like bringing me down, and like it's like that is white fragility. And it's not to say that it can be difficult and hard to listen to the experience of traumatic experiences that people have. But imagine waking up every morning, or the woman who goes to Starbucks and catches 3 people kind of watching her to see if she's going to steal something from the cafe counter.
Yep.
And that is an experience that someone once shared with me. And I was like, holy shit, I get to glide through this world and people just think I'm like a good boy, a good Catholic school boy with my white skin doing good things. I can't imagine that kind of perception and having to manage that in spaces where you go. Yeah. So the work is to not just talk about it. I think it's important for white folks to be educating and having these conversations with other white folks, so that marginalized communities don't always have to be doing the emotional labor.
Yeah. In Israel, it's the same thing. I mean, honestly, it's, there are marginalized groups in Israel that live in the shadows, and it evolves just like it did here, right? I mean, Russian Jews moving from Russia had to go through it. Ethiopian Jews who had to move from Ethiopia. And then obviously anybody who's from any of the surrounding Arab countries or from the Palestinian territories. It's like, and I think we have to keep having the conversation. We can't shut up about it, because if we shut up about it, then we are just pretending that it doesn't exist. And that's fine for us, quote unquote, because we don't live in that reality. I feel like we can go on with this for 5-6 hours. But this is not a Joe Rogan podcast. And for anybody who doesn't get the joke, go listen to a Joe Rogan podcast, who, by the way, I hope to be on his podcast sometime. So 3 to 4 hour podcasts are not uncommon for that guy. But our listeners expect about an hour. So we're going to do that for them. And we now got to the fun portion of asking you our 5 questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So question number 1, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. This is just what's coming to me right now. See the other as yourself.
I love it. Do you remember where you heard it or where you first got exposed to it?
It's so many places, like A Course in Miracles. No, I don't. No, I don't. I can't think of it off the top of my head where I first learned that. It's been affirmed from many places.
Awesome.
What about your proudest moment?
I think there have been a couple of times where someone has come up to me and said to me, you aren't any different in person than who I know you to be on your podcast. And that's like one of the greatest compliments, because I just want to be me anywhere I go. And so if people really feel that, I feel like that's such a nice reflection.
Oh yeah. Alignment, right?
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. What has been one of your most difficult moments to date?
I think picking myself up and getting back on my 2 feet as like a single man in LA, and getting my own apartment for the first time, and reorganizing my whole world around not being in a relationship that I sort of had found myself in a state of thinking I would always be in that relationship. It was kind of had become my everything.
Yeah.
And to be in a new city and to kind of restructure my life was one of the most challenging, and has been one of the most incredibly rewarding experiences for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Self-care rituals?
Yoga nidra. Yoga nidra practice. Salt baths with essential oils and Epsom salts. Yoga reorganizes every aspect of my whole mind, body, and spirit again and again.
Totally.
And walking. I love walking outside, just being outside and walking. Yeah.
It's the best.
That's beautiful. I love it. This podcast is called Ignited. And so we like to close off everybody asking them, what is it that gets you ignited? What gets you going? What drives your motivation and feels like the purpose that lights you up?
Yeah, I want this world to heal, and as much healing as I can help facilitate on individual and collective levels while I'm here, I want to be a part of that. I want to help people heal themselves individually, and I want to help them make that link into how their healing contributes actively to collective healing. And so that's why I'm doing all this.
Beautiful.
That's
same.
Beautiful. Yeah, same. And it comes through. It comes through in the way you speak and in the work that you do. Shannon, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. I'm sure everybody will love it. Looking forward to hearing more about your book that's going to be coming out.
And listening to your podcast.
Yeah, and we'll have links to all your stuff here. Man, thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining and doing the work that you do and helping people heal.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so awesome connecting with you both. You're both amazing, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
Have a good one.
Bye.
We'll see everybody next week. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.